Gideon versus Wainwright, landmark ruling on right to legal representation. Introduction. The right to a fair trial includes access to legal representation regardless of a person's economic and social class. In the case of Gideon versus Wainwright, the defendant was convicted of breaking into a pool room to commit petty larceny. Although the accused was poor and could not afford counsel, the trial court declined to appoint a lawyer for him. The defendant petitioned for a writ of habeas corpus. However, the Supreme Court turned down his petition, a decision that was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. Facts of the case. A burglary was reported to have occurred at the Bay Harbor pool room in Panama City, Florida. The unknown culprit broke into the pool room, where they smashed a cigarette machine and a record player. Additionally, it was alleged that some money was stolen from the cash register. Following an investigation by the police, a witness identified Clarence Gideon. According to the witness, the defendant left the pool room early that morning with a wine bottle and some money in his pockets. The officer relied on that information alone to charge him with breaking with the intent to commit petty larceny. History of the case. The case was brought before the trial court where the defendant appeared in court alone. The defendant argued that he was entitled to be represented by an appointed counsel. However, the court argued that the laws of the state of Florida allow the court to appoint counsel for a defendant only when charged with a capital offense and not petty larceny as was his. Consequently, he was subjected to a jury that returned a guilty verdict. The convict petitioned the jury decision, claiming that he was denied rights under the 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendments of the Bill of Rights. The Supreme Court of Florida, however, turned down the petition following the controversy around appointing a counsel in state and federal courts, as was in the case of Betts versus Brady. Legal questions. Clarence Gideon appealed the Supreme Court of Florida's decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. The legal issue was whether the Sixth Amendment right to counsel applies to criminal defendants not charged with capital offenses, who cannot afford an attorney, at state courts. Decisions. In deciding the case, the U.S. Supreme Court made clarifications on the previous controversial cases of Powell v. Alabama, 1932, and Betts v. Brady, 1942. In the two cases, the right to an appointed counsel was not guaranteed unless the defendant was illiterate, or the case was a complicated one. The court overturned that decision and judged in favor of Clarence Gideon. The rationale for the decision was that the right to counsel is guaranteed under the English common law and the U.S. Constitution. Additionally, the court believed that the Sixth Amendment right is vital for fairness and due process. Verdict and opinion. In the case, there was no dissenting opinion since all the 9 judges of the U.S. Supreme Court voted in favor of the appellant, stating that the right to counsel is fundamental for indigent defendants in state courts. However, there were 2 concurring opinions from Justices Hugo Black and William Douglas. The 2 justices emphasized the implicit nature of the Sixth Amendment and its importance on due process. Conclusion. The case decision benefited the state of Florida in various ways. After the decision, about 2,000 inmates were freed, promoting civil liberties in the state. Additionally, Clarence Gideon was subject to a retrial where the evidence failed to link him with the crime. Many poor Americans in various states would later enjoy the right to legal representation and fair trial. Therefore, the case of Gideon versus Wainwright made a hallmark on the concepts of fair trial and due process.